So after looking at the age of exploration, we're going to focus on absolute monarchs in Europe. This is the time period from about 1500 to 1800. Now notice that other things are going on at the same time. You got the Reformations going on, the Renaissance is starting to finish up, and explorations is definitely in full swing here. So know that even though we're studying this maybe as a separate topic, these things do overlap and they work together in unity. So the first country we're going to talk about is Spain and Spain's empire and European absolutism. So Charles V was the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. He controlled Spain and then other territories as well. So you can look at this map down here, and he controlled American colonies. Look at all the territory he had from Peru, South America, all the way up to North America. Parts of Italy, Austria, the Netherlands, and then parts of Africa as well as the Philippines. Charles V was a devout Catholic. He fought Muslims and Lutherans. The Reformation is going on during this time, and so he does not want the Catholic Church to split apart. But eventually, he's forced to actually split his empire apart. So Spain and the American colonies are going to go to one side, while the Italian and other territories in Europe are going to go to another side of his family. The person that took over for Charles V in Spain was Philip II, so he inherits the Spanish territories as well as colonies in the Americas. He does also seize Portugal and its territories, and he builds Spain. Philip II builds Spain into the most rich European country during this time period, especially with the influx of gold and silver from the New World. With this money, he's able to support a large standing army. Now, Philip II, he was kind of a recluse, which means that he didn't like dealing with people very much. So he built this beautiful kind of castle-looking thing over here called the Escorial. And this is during a time of religious turmoil, so he would be in here and just write letters to people and rule from afar. But he wants to defend Catholicism more than anything else. So during his early reign, he actually attacks the Ottoman Empire, which shows his devoutness to Catholicism by trying to defeat the Muslims. And then in addition to that, he actually launches what is called the Spanish Armada against England. England at the time was under Elizabeth I, who was a Protestant leader, and Spain did not like that, so they sent a fleet full of ships, a couple hundred ships, to England. But Spain was defeated in a heavy loss to its navy, and it's at this point that Spain is in a perpetual decline from this point on. So for a while, Spain was the top dog, but then they start getting beat up by some of the other European countries. This was also the Spanish age, the golden age of art and literature. So kind of like the Italian Renaissance, this influx of wealth allowed the expansion of art. El Greco and Velázquez were the most famous artists of this time period. This is a painting on the left-hand side of El Greco, which has a little bit more abstract, but it is still very Catholic. And then on the right is Velázquez, who was the kind of the pride of the Spanish monarchy. He really painted some beautiful pictures that is about real life and realism. In addition to this, Don Quixote was written at this time by Miguel Cervantes. So there's several reasons why the Spanish Empire weakened. First off was inflation and taxes. So the population was growing significantly, and there's too much silver coming into the country. This makes the price of food and services increase significantly, while the silver value drops. So this is what inflation is, right? Things get too expensive, and the value of money goes down. So the nobles aren't taxed, the poor can't become middle class. So you had this huge wealth gap between the very, very rich and then everybody else who's poor. In addition to that, they weren't very good at mercantilism. Now let's remember that mercantilism, you want to get as much gold and silver as possible. But Spain was not self-sufficient, and they didn't produce any of their own goods. So they bought a lot of their manufactured goods from England and from France and stuff like that. So their money is flowing out. Remember that they don't have this favorable balance of trade. And so they're actually losing money during this time period. And Spain borrowed a lot of money to wage different wars, one of which was the Dutch Revolt. So this is in the Netherlands that was controlled by Spain for a long time. But the Dutch, at this point, they don't have very much common with the Spanish. One, they're not Catholic. They are more Protestant, but more than anything, they have religious toleration. They don't like being ruled by an absolute ruler. So they fight against the Philip for about 11 years, and eventually the Netherlands declares independence. Now know that the Netherlands for a long time included Belgium and the Netherlands, and so the Netherlands became independent, the northern part of it. The southern part, which will become Belgium eventually, still stays as a Spanish possession. So after the split, or even during this time, Dutch art flourishes. The Dutch in general prosper from a lot of their trade and things like that. One of the most famous artists at this time was Rembrandt, who painted this painting down here. He's kind of a master of using really, really dark colors on the edges and stuff, but also really bright colors as the center of paintings. In addition, the Dutch trading empire grew significantly. They had the strongest banks. Amsterdam became the world's center of trade. The merchants were very smart, profit-driven. There was a middle class in the Dutch Netherlands. They eventually grew the largest naval fleet in the world, and they created the Dutch East India Company, which controlled most of the trade that flowed in the Indian Ocean. So absolutism in Europe, one thing you got to know is that kings and queens held all the power. So they took all the power from the small, kings, the feudal lords and things like that, and they concentrated that power under one person. So there was also this belief at the time of divine right, that gods created the monarch and that they were appointed by God to rule. So there's a reason for the growth of the power of these monarchs. First, the decline of feudalism, like I mentioned earlier. You have the growth of cities, so they're easier controlled. These countries are easier controlled by a centralized authority. And then the middle class supports monarchs because it brings stability. Before, there was just a lot of turmoil and things like that. And for example, like it says down here, the crises lead to absolutism, so the religious wars, which we'll talk about next period. There's lots of peasant revolts, and monarchs want more control. So by creating this absolutism, they're stopping a lot of the crises that are going around, and people like this period of calm where business and markets can flourish.